Hi, and welcome to It's Not Obvious Learn from Others edition. And today I will be talking about snowboard competition. Specifically, I am talking about snowboard competition with my coach here, Timmy G. So, uh, typically, the Learn from Others series is for fun and it's usually about topics that I have little knowledge of. Now, in this case, I have been a snowboarder, I've taught snowboarding, and Timmy G is my coach, but I've never actually done snowboard competition, and he has. So I'm like, well, I want to know more about snowboard competition, and it sounds really cool, but I don't even know where to get started. And I figure a lot of you, if you're tuning into this episode, you're probably also curious about it. So this episode is really intended for anyone who is interested in joining snowboard competitions. And as far as the topics today, we're gonna start broadly with, what is a snowboard competition? Where do you find these kind of competitions? What do you need to be able to do or demonstrate to even be part of the competition? I mean, what do you do? What do you demonstrate? How good do you need to be as a snowboarder to get there? How is scoring done? And I'm kind of old. I'm a little embarrassed to say that, but I'm not young. And I go, well, are there any sort of age brackets? Because if I'm trying to compete with daredevil 17-year-olds, I'm probably not going to be very successful. And of course, for Timmy G, I also want to know, before he started snowboard competition, before he started participating in them, what do you wish you knew before you got started? So we'll get there too. And I think, if I remember correctly, Timmy G has a Shaun White story where he encountered Shaun White early in Shaun White's career, and he has an interesting story about that. All right, so as always, the disclaimer is that this episode and anything you hear here is intended to be anecdotal, is not intended to be an expert opinion or expert advice. Definitely work with a coach, find out more from your local mountain, and take everything that we say with a grain of salt. This is our opinion, and this is my chat with Timmy G, which I hope you find useful. Okay, so here's Timmy G, and thanks, Timmy, for taking the time to to be interviewed by me
Mhm.
and to chat with me about your experience as a snowboard competitor.
Yeah, happy to do it.
Yeah, awesome, cool. So yeah, I think, when was the last time you competed, and how long were you competing in overall in your career?
Yeah, so I had a couple, you might call two small, short careers, I guess. You might, if you can call it a career, I guess, because I've mostly just been a snowboard instructor my whole life, kind of thing. But I just love to ride really good half pipes, and the competitions are where the half pipes are most primo, is so
Mm,
you can get
I
the
see.
best riding if they you know just dial them in really nice for the competition. So it's been over 10 years now. Probably somewhere around 2006, 2007 was the last time I competed, probably. um, and so very early on, I'm talking the early 90s, right? I started competing when snowboard competitions were few and far between, kind of rare.
Hmm.
But I was in search of a better half pipe to ride and to have more fun. So started competing. It was actually at Grand Targhee. Yeah, Grand Targhee in Wyoming is where I first went to some snowboard camps just to learn more freestyle stuff. And then I found out I was just it was just far enough away, but close enough that it was one ski resort that had a half pipe anyway. And so it wasn't great. It certainly wasn't a great half pipe. It was very early before there was no pipe dragons to actually cut them properly yet or anything. So it was all hand dug, right? So
Oh wow.
some guys there had to do it with a shovel, right? Um, and so consequently, in between competitions, like it would just not be maintained hardly at all. It would be really pretty, not even close to vert or anything. It was pretty bad. Anyway, and so I traveled all the way there, got there on a Saturday, and the half pipe was closed, for maintenance, right? They're going to work on it and stuff, or they had just worked on it and they were going to close it and save it. I guess it wasn't until Sunday when the competition was, and I'm like, why can I not ride it? And they're like, well, if you're in the competition, you can ride it. I'm like,
Oh,
where do I sign up? Just so I can ride the half pipe because I'm here. I don't want to waste lift tickets and not be able to ride the half pipe, right?
I see.
Um,
Huh.
and I didn't. So yeah, I started out getting like last place, right? Like it was, because I had no idea what I was doing. Because our home mountain did not have a half pipe or anything like that, right?
Okay.
Um, yeah, so that's how I got into it, And it wasn't until later that I tried a few pro contests. That's just because friends were like, "Oh, you should do it. You should do it." And I'm like, "Okay, fine, I'll try." Kind of thing.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you've this is a slight digression about snowboard competitions in general, but there's a couple of things there that you mentioned that wasn't super obvious to me, and
Okay.
I'm not sure if it's obvious to other people. So first of all, you mentioned free riding, and then you also mentioned a snow dragon that shapes the half pipe. I really didn't know people used to make the half pipes by hand. That
It's a
sounds
lot of hard work. Yeah.
extremely painful and a
Yeah.
lot of hard work. Yeah,
Yes.
that sounds miserable. Oh my gosh. And I also don't know why you like the half pipe so much. I mean, now that I've
Ah,
tried the half pipe a little bit, I can kind of get it. I can kind of see it. It's like, oh, okay, interesting. But you consistently, for all the time that I've known you, you really like the half pipe.
this is
And
true.
I
Yeah.
know that there
Yeah.
are other snowboard instructors too, like the ones in from Timberline, who
Hmm.
also really absolutely love the half pipe. And I don't get it. It's not obvious to me. So
Yeah.
yeah. So take it whatever way you want. Those are just kind of some of the things that are on my mind. So I think first of all,
Yeah.
when you said uh,
Well, I
free,
can explain why I'm so obsessed with half pipes. I can explain it.
yeah, yeah, totally.
Yeah. The reason why is because, especially in the early days of snowboarding, jumps were not very well designed, and especially the landings were not very well designed. They
Okay.
were not steep enough and icy and
Ooh,
just not groomed hardly ever and stuff, right? So consequently, if you started to become a much, a good enough snowboarder to go, say, 10, 20 feet through the air, maybe farther, it started to get really hard on your feet and your knees, right? It started to really hurt when you landed, right?
I see.
And so, but then you go into the half pipe, and if the half pipe was even remotely halfway decent or something like that, right? You could get 4 or 5 or sometimes 6 hits. Because back in my day, we were only going 2 or 3, maybe 5 or 6 feet above the lip is all, right? Nothing compared to a super pipe nowadays, because they were tighter transitions and stuff. Um, but so sometimes you could get, if you really milk the half pipe, you could get 7 or 8 hits in the half pipe, right?
Wow.
And so
Okay.
you would go up and get out of the half pipe, and you'd have this perfect downhill landing, right? It was just so smooth, the landing,
I
right?
see.
And then catch some
Okay.
air,
That
a
makes
smooth
sense. That
landing.
makes a lot of
So,
sense. Yeah.
so instead of a snowboard park where it's like, oh, okay, I get 4 or 5 hits, and it's like bam, bam, bam.
Mm.
Instead, it's like swoosh, swoosh for landings. And at the bottom of it, you were out of breath and tired and got a whole bunch of cool tricks in compact space, and your feet didn't hurt. So
Wow.
that's what was awesome about it. You know?
Okay. I never knew that. And I never realized that.
Yeah.
I I guess I can see that now, and that that makes me even more excited and kind of sad now that we don't have a half pipe. I know that in our
Yeah, at our
local
local mountains.
mountain,
Yeah.
Stevens, I think, used to have a half pipe, but then they took it out for some reason. I guess
Yeah.
they didn't want to maintain it, or the
And
equipment
they
is a
must
little too
still have,
expensive.
yeah, I think they found that because it is a specific thing to learn and you have so much vert, like less than 10% of your snowboard population even can ride it properly, right?
Mm, I
And
see.
so it seemed like a waste to put all that money for such a small amount of riders that were actually paying lift tickets to ride it, right?
Got it.
And so, but last time I was there, they did have a couple of quarter pipes. So it was like they had
Oh
half
yeah,
pipes,
I
but
think I have seen
they
that.
moved them. They moved them down the hill like this, so you could go and get one hit over there, then go down and hit another one. So you could kind of feel like you're getting some kind of half pipe like air, at least a
Well,
couple of hits. So
yeah, I think I saw
yeah,
like a tiny, almost like a baby, it like a quarter pipe that was barely taller than me, kind of thing. Maybe like more like
that's
eight
cool.
feet, 10 feet,
Sometimes they
kind of
do.
thing.
Mini pipe they call it. Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah.
the
It's a good intro to transition that way. To teach people on it.
mm,
So
yeah, and the park over in Stevens, I felt like it's actually pretty small compared to our central park. I guess that's what I'm
yeah,
comparing it to.
yeah. Nowadays, it used to be bigger back when it used to be on the other side of Stevens Pass's mountain. It used to be on the right side looking up the mountain. Now they put it in the middle, which has a high speed quad, so it's a faster. You get up to the
Right.
top of the park faster,
Yeah.
but on the way down, it's like yeah, boom, 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 and there's steeper landings, and so yeah, it's kind of over with quicker.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you like really steep landings, it's a pretty fun park.
Yeah, I keep
But
forgetting that you used to teach at Stevens too, so you know these kinds of things really well. So
yeah, I
yeah,
know that
that's
history
cool.
gets you fast,
That's
but
cool. Um,
hmm
yeah, so you also mentioned free style or free ride earlier, and I think freestyle
mm.
is the one where you learn park tricks, and free ride is where you jump cliffs or something like that.
Yeah, and that's like yeah, and being able to do real competitions and free ride, and there'll be a free ride world tour is kind of recent. I think it's only been around 10 years or so. It hasn't been around a long, long time, as far as I know. So like it
Well,
wasn't even on my radar as like, oh, that's something you can do. Like I'd
I
never
thought
even
I
heard of
heard,
a
I thought
competition.
I
Yeah.
heard that this past season there was somebody from the summit, one of the students of Summit Free Ride, I think, won the local
Oh,
competition.
oh, the local one. Oh, okay. Oh, the one over, I think at Crystal. Yeah, they come to Crystal and they have part of the world tour. They do have a free ride competition at Crystal.
Hmm.
Um, oh, you're thinking of Alpental. Alpental has a free ride
Right,
competition.
exactly.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah. It's not part of the world tour, but it's a local competition. Yeah.
no, I'm pretty sure that they
Mhm.
trained at Alpental and then they went somewhere else and they won a competition and that it was
Oh, okay.
actually a pretty big
Huh.
deal, like for the state or something like that. I don't
Yeah, yeah.
remember.
For a local person, yeah, that's a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, um, one of the um, Blake Hamm, yeah, one of my ex students from over a decade ago that I taught in the early 2000s and stuff. Blake Hamm is on the world tour, and I was just looking up his stats. He's been on the world tour now for 5 or 6 years, something like that. Um, and before the pandemic, like two or 3 years ago, he got like third place in the world or something like that
Jeez.
for the whole series for the whole World Series. Yeah, pretty awesome.
Wow.
So I'm really proud of him and stuff.
Yeah, I
He's
mean, I can
yeah,
totally understand. I would be too. Um,
yeah, and so he's a Stevens Pass local. So
I see.
another local that's done good on the World Tour.
You know, I keep
Um,
forgetting that the one of the things that wasn't obvious to me up until this past season is that the the snow sports scene is actually pretty small. It's a very small community overall. And it's something
yeah,
that I didn't realize until this past season and joining the Summit Snow Sport. I mean, before I was in an even smaller bubble with Mohan with the boutique ski school,
yeah,
right?
well, private ski school. Yeah.
Yeah, but I've always thought outside of Mohan that there was this big old industry with lots of people all around the world and that you get lost among the uh, faceless names and numbers or whatever. But then I found out that actually the industry is pretty small and people get to know one another pretty quickly and people build a reputation for better or
Yeah,
worse pretty
when
quickly.
you narrow it down to the passionate people that kind of live to do it, be it live to instruct or live to compete or just even work at the mountain full time or something like that, right? Yeah, that's a pretty small group. Yeah. hmm
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And
Versus the number of people that just try it for fun, right?
right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it also made me realize that like, oh my gosh, like I better be careful. I don't want to piss people off and like have a bad reputation for the rest of my time um, participating in snow sports because I want to be doing this for the rest of my life, you know. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Well,
that wasn't obvious to me until this past season. Anyway, we've
yeah.
chatted for a while, and I still
Okay.
don't
Yeah.
know. I wanted to get into like the dragon stuff, but maybe I should get into the
Okay.
thing I said I wanted to get into, which is
Okay.
where do I even find competitions? So
Okay.
you know me, and you've trained me, and you know my skill level. I don't think I'm good enough to necessarily compete, but you know what? I am totally
Not
okay
yet.
joining a competition and starting out last place and working my way up. I am
Yeah. Yeah.
totally okay
And
with that.
I
But
know
I
from
don't.
experience that there's nothing wrong with that.
That's great. That is
Yeah.
actually super encouraging to hear you
Yeah.
say that because I do look
Yeah.
up to you as my coach, and I do look up to you as
Yeah.
an amazing snowboarder and snowboard instructor.
Yeah.
So
Now, as a coach and a friend, I would recommend that whatever competition you choose to go for or whatever is that you do know that you have the skills to at least make it to the landings, or
right.
say it's a slope style competition and there's rails or something that you know you can at least straight run the rails and get to the landings, right?
Well,
um
I really,
because you don't want to get hurt in the competition, right?
yeah.
That's no fun for anybody. Right?
I think the thing that the type of snowboard competition that I really would love to be a part of is the border
Hmm.
cross type of
Oh yeah,
competition.
border cross. Yeah.
Because I
Hmm.
feel that I would do pretty well or decent enough in a border cross as opposed to jumps or tricks and stuff.
Hmm.
That's me. I love to just put the pedal to the metal and just go as fast as I can, make sharp turns, navigate all of
Hmm.
this stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't even know where to find any sort of snowboard competition. I mean, I suppose I can probably look
Hmm.
online, but
Yeah.
a lot of times
Well,
the
yeah.
schedule don't show up until it's too late, or like it shows up 2 weeks before the competition. I'm like, oh man, I already have plans. Is there a better way of doing this?
That's one challenge. Yeah. Yeah. When it comes to depends on the competition and the series and stuff, how early they post their schedule and stuff. If it's USSA or USASA, and they finally worked out a deal. That's the competitions you get into if you want to do a whole series and you eventually want to add up enough points to maybe go for the Olympic team or something like
Wait,
that.
so you just said
Um,
USAA, so I
yeah,
think you're
or
saying that
USASA or
USASA,
USSA. Yeah.
USSA. Okay. And
Yeah.
so if I were to go to their website, would I be able to find upcoming competitions?
Yes, yeah, and they're the more organized, more they've been doing it for many, many years. They're all kind of related to the ski side of things too, at least on USSA. They also do ski competitions, right? And so they plan pretty far ahead, right?
I see.
Now it's August, September. I would expect September, October, they're probably already at least have the dates and locations worked out, right?
So you
So
mentioned
they'll see
dates
what
and
those.
locations worked out. So
Mhm.
you're saying that I would probably have to travel to another state in order to attend it then.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember last time I saw. I haven't been, on the USSA website and I don't. And USASA is pretty cool and popular with snowboarders because it was created by snowboarders and stuff. But most of their competitions are in the East Coast or California, as far as I know.
Mm,
Um, Maybe sometimes they do competitions up here. I'm not sure in the Northwest. But in the Northwest, you'd probably find more USSA type competitions, the Northwest and Intermountain West kind of thing, um, and probably mostly at Mount Hood or something like that. Mostly, um, I haven't. They probably do. I just haven't noticed if USSA has actually done anything at Snoqualmie or at Stevens recently. They probably do something at Stevens. I just haven't looked on their schedule and stuff in a while.
okay.
So there's those are the series that you'd want to get into if you want to add up points to for the whole season kind of thing,
So
right?
I
But
guess
there's other like Stevens Pass or other or like Baker will just put on their own
right.
competitions just for
Yeah.
the fun of it, right?
I'm aware of
And
that.
the most famous one is Mount Baker's Bank Slalom, right? But that one has a long waiting list because it's so famous.
Mm.
So you'd have to like 2 or 3 years ahead of time. You'd have to pay your money and then wait till your,
Really?
your ticket comes up. Yeah,
Oh,
because
jeez.
it's so famous. Yeah, that one's very very popular.
There's a 2 or 3 year waiting list just to join the
Yeah.
bank slalom competition.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yep.
again, that's not
Yep.
obvious to me, and wow. Uh,
Yeah.
okay, okay,
But that's a special. Bank slaloms are kind of a rare thing anyway. It's there's no bank slalom in the Olympics or something like that. It's just border cross, half pipe, and then like regular slalom and maybe grand slalom maybe for snowboarding. And those are people doing hard boots right on their snowboards.
that's
Um,
fascinating. Okay,
yeah. So the trick would be finding on either USASA or USSA where they would probably be the ones doing slope style competitions
okay.
because
Well,
that's yeah
so
you'd have to look
you
into that.
also mentioned that there's a price to it. How much do these typically cost to join the competition?
Yeah, it varies. I remember, of course, I haven't looked recently, right? But at least when I was doing it, you would pay $50, usually less than $100 for the entrance fee,
Hmm.
and then you would
Does that
maybe have to
include
pay
like?
your own lift ticket on top of that,
Oh,
right? So that's
okay.
why I preferred. I tried to do competitions that were at my local mountain. I already had a season's pass already,
Right,
right? That
exactly.
made it more affordable, right? Because I didn't have until except for one competition, I didn't have a sponsor that was paying for me to get in, right?
Huh.
That's why it's such a big deal to get up to like, oh, I'm good enough that some snowboard shop or somebody will sponsor me. And the first thing, it's even better than getting a free snowboard or something, is like, oh, they'll pay my competition fee to get in. Like, so it's not on you every time.
That's fair. That does sound really appealing.
Yeah.
That said, I think one of the reasons why I want to experiment with snowboard competition is because given that I've been teaching snowboarding for a few years now, and I want to get better at snowboarding in general, and I want to have these kinds of experiences so that I can talk about it honestly with my students, and that if I
Hmm.
have students who is interested in snowboard competitions, then I can very directly coach them and be like, okay, yeah, this is what I've done, this is what's happened, this is what you need to know, and it's actually kind of like the gist of what this episode is really about anyway, to bring in that kind of knowledge that are not obvious unless you've done it.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
uh, I guess the question that I have for now is, would it be better for me to get as good as I can be in local competitions first before I join the rank ones? Or is it,
Yeah. I'd recommend doing, yeah, if you can find, depends on how specific. I mean, since you just want to do border cross, right?
well, I guess what I
if
mean is
if
that,
there's any mountains doing just a border cross just for fun, right? It's just like,
yeah,
oh, it's just a Stevens Pass for fun. You just, you get a ribbon at the end or something, right? Though sometimes they'll, especially, and there is amateur versus pro, right? They're like two different crowds, two different purposes, and so therefore
mm,
an amateur one,
I
there's
see.
there's no money, there's no money to win at the end, but they usually throw out swag, like they might throw out goggles, or they'll get companies to donate, boots or goggles or something. So you might win a snowboard or something if you won the competition, kind of thing.
So maybe I might
Um,
want to look into the amateur competitions first
yeah,
before I try
yeah.
the
So
pro
that
ones.
would be the trick, is finding amateur ones, and technically the USSA are amateur competitions. They're not pro, right? Um, and so that's what they are, the farm team, so to speak. That's where people
Well,
start,
I
work their
guess
way up. Yeah.
more like I wonder if this works the way, for example, school grades or school GPA works, right? Like when it comes to school grades or school GPAs, you typically want to get as high as you can early on, and then keep it up, uh, keep up the higher grades throughout, because then you're going to end up graduating with a higher grade. And
Yes,
I
that
guess
that is how tours work. Yes. Uh-huh.
and does it carry over from year to year, or does it reset every year?
No, no, it restarts every season. Yeah,
I
it,
see.
it
Okay.
restarts every season. At least at the amateur level, it does. At the pro level, they might first they might use previous years, like the first competition of the season. They might use scores, and that's only for seeding. Like in races where you want to be on the course early in the morning first, you want to, for the best possible time, you want to be going down the course first. I think
I
for
see.
for for ski racers, they're like, oh, my better score last year helps me get to go earlier down the course, in the
Okay.
next competition, kind of thing. But when it comes to freestyle stuff, it doesn't really matter as much. Yeah,
Okay. That makes sense. That wasn't obvious to
yeah,
me, and that was super helpful. Thank you.
yeah.
Okay. So, um, I think you already mentioned a little bit in terms of what you need to be able to do, demonstrate. It depends on what kind of competition you want to join,
Hmm.
and you want to have some baseline abilities first. You need to know what the obstacles or what the objectives are going to be, and that you can do it safely at minimum. Um,
Right. Yeah.
and as far as
Hmm.
scoring, I assume that scoring, it depends, right? Because there are those tricks that are a little bit more objective, depending on how technical, depending on how clean, depending on how difficult the trick is. And then
Hmm.
there's others, probably like for border crossing, it's more about just time. How fast did you
Yeah.
get
Border
there?
cross, thankfully, is just time,
Yeah,
right?
and slalom also is also
Yeah, and
just
slalom.
time.
Exactly. So those are more objective, right?
Okay.
Yes, and the more subjective disciplines, that's always been I don't know, a bone of contention, I guess, between both the judges and, of course,
Right.
the people writing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like I did the coolest tweak or something like that. I should have got more points. And that was, especially in my era, that was a big thing. Is like it was just the beginning of spin to win, was right?
What does
Like
that mean?
in the
What
early,
does spin to win mean?
spin to win means like, oh, if you can do a 1080, and it doesn't matter if you can grab or it has any style, and or how high off the lip it was, just the fact that you hucked really fast, spun a 1080, and barely rode it out, right? Just because it's that extra half a rotation or something, would get you, high enough points,
Huh.
because the judges were like, well, it's another 180, so I can easily give you more points for it, right? Whereas how cool you looked in the air, how high you went over the lip was a little harder to judge, right? And so therefore harder to give more points for, right?
I
And so
see.
it became the people who got really good at milking competitions and just milking their way up the uh, the point ranking as far as like just because the more you compete, you learn what the judges value, and then you morph your run to maximize what the judges will give you points for, right? And it just
Interesting.
became like more and more spins, right?
Okay. Okay, that
And of
makes
course, more
sense.
and more upside down, right? More and more upside down tricks, right?
Okay. So just
Yeah.
really quickly before we get into a couple of other things, are there any sort of age brackets for the competitions? And the reason why I'm asking
Yes.
this, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
okay. So that means that if I were to compete right now, I wouldn't be competing with 17-year-olds, for better or worse. I mean, in a way, I would be competing with other people who technically have been snowboarding for like 20 years or 30 years or something, whereas I haven't snowboarded that long. Uh,
Yeah.
but it also means that it's on a little bit more equal footing in terms of physical abilities, maybe.
Yes. Yes. So yes, they do. Of course, it's more finely graduated, or whatever. In the sort of Grom. So like they probably I haven't looked recently, but it's probably like 13 years and younger is probably its own category, right? And then there's like 13 years to 15 years old, and then there's like 16 to 18 or 19, I think, and then there's probably 20 to 35 or something, right? Like
Okay.
anybody. So that would be a hard one to compete in, right? Because you have some guys that are in their early 20s that have competed for a while and they're damn
Yeah,
good, right?
that would be
But then
terrible.
you're like 32, 33, and you're like, oh, I'm feeling old. um, Thankfully, I didn't feel old till I was like 36 or something. But anyway, but then somewhere they call it the Masters division, somewhere where it's like, I don't know, it's 35 and above. Well, there's like 35 to like 50 or something like that, 35 to
Oh, that's
50,
me.
like one
That's
thing.
me.
I
Yeah.
think they call it, yeah, I think they call it Masters, I think. And then they have another name for like 50 and above, which is just the gray haired old guys. you know, so I'm almost there.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Mhm.
So just really, two more questions. So one is, what do you wish you knew before you started? And
Hmm.
two, do you have
Mhm.
time to tell us the Shaun White story?
Okay, sure. Yeah, it's a funny story. So, what I wish I knew before I got into competition. I guess I wish I'd known what my own potential was, right?
Hmm.
Like, because I'd never had a coach. There wasn't hardly any coaches to hire back then. um, and, um, and, and I don't know that I could afford a coach anyway at the time. So, um, I wish I'd known my potential. Like, I always surprised myself when I did finally get on a podium or something and get in the top three in a
Hmm.
competition.
I see.
I never expected to be able to do that, right? Because I always came in as an underdog, where it's like, okay, these guys from Salt Lake City have their own half pipes at their local ski resort, right? They're practicing their half pipe runs all the time. I don't. So for a month or so, I haven't ridden a half pipe. I just show up and I literally am copying. I'm like, oh, that's a cool trick they just did. I'll try it. and um,
Wow.
yeah, so the ones I actually, like my one gold medal from like a Utah Winter Games or something was literally because the conditions were so bad, like the half pipe was terrible, and it wasn't the shaper's fault. It was really just snow conditions problem where they had a bad ice and a rain, and then it got warm, and then it froze again, right? And it just created
Oh man.
really bad layers in the snow, right? And so it created like a trench along the transition of the wall, and you had to ollie and jump up to the wall, then continue up, do your trick, come down and ollie again because there's a big ditch right in the middle of the transition. And I was like, well, I've been used to riding really bad half pipes or really bad snow and rocks in the wrong place all the time, right? And
Wow.
stuff. That's been the whole life. So like, oh, whatever, nothing new to me, right? Whereas all the other guys were like, oh, we can't ride this, right? I can't do any of my tricks, blah blah. So
Wow. I see. Okay.
so I
That's still
accidentally
cool
won.
though. That's still really cool though.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So Shaun
Yeah.
White story?
All right. So that was another funny accident where, yeah, our first time ever doing the whole series with USSA. Um, my brother and I, even though we went to every single competition and we were having fun, it was great. Um, we were placing pretty badly, like always the bottom half or maybe the middle or something like that, right? Never, I don't think any podiums that season, I don't think. Anyway, but the thing is, not everybody goes to every single competition, right? Some people only go to half the competitions, right?
Mm.
And so their points don't add up as much, even if they might have gotten a podium and then skipped a few competitions or something, right?
Interesting.
And
Okay.
so near the end of but we knew we didn't have enough to go to, or certainly didn't expect to have enough to go to amateur nationals, which was on the East Coast anyway. And like, how are we going to pay for that, right? Fly all the way over there. And then we get this last minute call like 2 weeks before the competition over Sugarloaf in Maine. They're like, hey, the people who actually qualified can't go, right? So you guys have a spot. You have 2 spots. You can come along with the team if you want, if you can come up with the money to go, right?
Wow.
So, and I just started a snowboard team at the college and stuff, right, at university. So I went to the university like, you can do this emergency ask for money or whatever, and
Okay.
they had some money to give, I guess. And so they said, oh, you can go to nationals, and represent the college. Okay, great, we'll pay for it. And we're like, okay, pay our plane tickets
Nice.
over there. So they
Nice.
paid for us to go over there and they paid all the fees. And so we show up and expecting to get last place, right, because we shouldn't even have qualified, right? But it was great. We got to bunk with, they had this condo with the other team members and stuff that were representing all of the mountain area. So we were the team from Utah and Idaho and Montana and that sort of thing, right, in Wyoming. And so Rob Kingwell was there, and Rob Kingwell is a really cool, nice guy. And he had ridden at Mount Hood the summer before and like washed dishes and stuff and just trained really hard in the half pipe all the previous summer, right? So he had his snowboarding dialed in a half pipe, right? And half pipe was his thing. Um, and so he did really well. He got like second place or something like that in the national competition, right? First or second, I can't remember which. Anyway, might have gotten first, maybe. I'm not sure. And so that's when he got invited to go as a beginning like B team member of the Olympic team. They were just starting to form an Olympic team with Olympics in the future. And the Olympics I don't even officially announce for the Olympics yet, I don't think. But anyway, and so and he worked his way up on the Olympic team, and he did good on the world tour and stuff for the next like 10 years or something. But never did quite get in the Olympics though, poor guy, but great guy. And anyway, so he did really well. And then so we're up there. It was a pretty decent half pipe, kind of big and wide and stuff. Not huge walls. It's springtime, so it's kind of slushy and stuff. So we had a really fun time riding there, and really fun. And it was all you could do to keep your speed, right? It's kind of slushy, so it's a little slow. The snow is a little slow, right?
Yeah.
So you had to really pump the walls in order to keep your speed, and it wasn't a very steep pipe. So you had to really pump the walls and really rail it across and really pump up the other side like a skateboarder, right? Really pump up to really get any real serious air out, right? And I could probably only get 3 or 4 feet out or something like that. It wasn't really great. Other guys were getting probably 5 or 6 feet out easy. And so while I'm waiting up my turn there, and we were pretty low seated, right? So we were going pretty much last and stuff. Anyway, here's this little kid, right? This little kid with like already had long hair and stuff, right? Little helmet on and stuff. He's like 11, 12 years old, something like that. And he just goes down the half pipe, and he's like by far the youngest kid there, right? I'm like, wow, look at this young kid that qualified for nationals, right? This is amazing. And he was representing the East Coast. He's from the East Coast time. And he goes down, and I could just see that, like, I'm like, there's a kid that also skateboards, right? I could see he skateboarded and he had serious skills, right? I'm like, wow, he's just milking that transition for all it's worth, and he's got cool tricks. And I think he even did a flippy up down trick or maybe or something. Anyway, and I looked at that kid and I went, yep, that's why I'm becoming an engineer, because he's going to the Olympics. I'm not, right? He's got the skills to pay the bills, right? And he's, because he's, give him another 10 years of practice, he's going to be amazing, right? And I didn't know he was already sponsored at the time and stuff like I didn't know. Anyway, and already sponsored by Burton of all people, right? Anyway, and so I had no idea who this kid was, right? It wasn't until 10, 15 years later that I made the connection. I'm like, and I learned a bit more about Shaun White and where he came from. Sure, he grew up in California. Says he grew up in California, but that was like after 13 years old, like 13, 14 years old. He moved to California to just, train more and stuff. But he was on the East Coast when he was younger as a kid for a few years. Anyway, and so he was relative local there, I guess. And I got like second to last place. He would have gotten a higher placing, but he just was too light. He didn't weigh enough, right? He was so lightweight that he just couldn't go fast enough to really get above the lip very far. And not because of his lack of skill, it's just he didn't weigh enough. He needed to put on more pounds, right? So I knew that if he had just weighed more, if he had just weighed 20, 30 pounds more, he would have beat me, right?
I
And
see.
I've been riding for 10, 15 years, right? So I'm like, yeah, he's going to be amazing. And sure enough, the rest, as they say, is history. Everybody,
Yeah.
Shaun White's a household name across the entire world now.
But now you're saying that in that particular competition, you actually did manage to beat Shaun White.
Yeah, he did end up getting
Yeah.
last place, and I got like second last or something. but
Well, that's still a pretty cool
I
story.
still think he deserved better than last place.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, very cool, very cool.
Anyway,
So
yeah.
I think that's all the time we have
Okay.
for this episode. So thank you so much for taking the time. And I was thinking that in the future, maybe we can talk a little bit more about how to properly train for competitions, or you
Mm-hmm.
know, for myself, I don't expect to ever hit the podium or to reach some place amazing. I really don't think that. But again, you
Yeah.
mentioned just now that you also didn't expect that for yourself, and there were times that you surprised yourself. So maybe there's hope
Yeah.
for me, and maybe there's hope
Yeah.
for anyone
Oh,
listening.
sorry.
And probably one of the things that people will be wondering also as they listen to this is like, well, okay, it's one thing to go to competitions for fun,
Mm-hmm.
but if we're serious about trying to get to the podium, like how do we properly train for it? So let's save that
Mm-hmm.
for another time. Let's save that
Okay.
for another episode. But
That'd be a very fun topic. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, cool. All right. Well, thank you so much. And I guess I'll do the ending. So as always, I'll ask you, the viewers, if there were anything during this episode that were obvious to you, and I hope that you learned something new from this episode. And of course, if there are other things that are not obvious to you that you wish we had gotten into some more during this episode, please say so in the comments, and we'll see what we can do. Maybe we'll just start another episode, or if it's something quick, I can probably just respond to it. And of course, if you like the episode, please subscribe for more content. Thank you, and see you next time.